If you have followed Formula One long enough to remember the days of Piquet, Prost, Senna, and the V12 Scarlet Screamers at Monza, you know that no team in this sport carries as much mythology or as much pressure as Ferrari. Every season at Maranello begins with hope, swells with expectation, and too often ends with disappointment. But 2026 is not just another season. It is the beginning of a new technical era, a reset so profound that it threatens to redraw the competitive map entirely. And for Ferrari, a team desperate to reclaim the consistency and authority it once wielded under Schumacher and Jean Todt, 2026 represents both an opportunity and a final test of identity. To understand what Ferrari may become in 2026, one must examine three intertwined components: the technical reboot, the leadership evolution, and the cultural struggle within Maranello. Only by analyzing these forces can we predict whether Ferrari will rise with the new regulations or continue its long, agonizing cycle of almost. Let us start with the heart of the revolution, the 2026 power unit and aerodynamic reset. These regulations fundamentally shift the emphasis of Formula One away from the internal combustion engine and deeply toward electrification, energy deployment, and efficiency-driven aero. Ferrari, historically, have been masters at one half of this equation, mechanical power. From the V6 turbo hybrids to the powerful V10s and V12s that once defined the sport, Ferrari have always taken pride in their engines. But 2026 reduces the ICE's influence. The new hybrid rules require a 50-50 balance between electrical and combustion power, forcing Ferrari to accelerate development in areas where they have historically lacked consistency. The Maranello Power Unit division has made progress, but insiders acknowledge a difficult truth. Ferrari's hybrid systems have trailed Mercedes and Honda in efficiency, deployment strategy, and thermal robustness. In 2026, that cannot continue. The question is whether Ferrari's engineering restructuring, which began 2 seasons earlier, will finally bear fruit in the new hybrid era. Expect Ferrari's engine to be competitive on outright power, as always. But the real battle will be in energy recovery optimization, especially at circuits where electrical deployment outweighs raw horsepower. Next comes aerodynamics, an area where Ferrari has oscillated between brilliance and bafflement. The 2026 regulations introduce active aero elements and simplify underfloor design. This is both a blessing and a curse for Ferrari. A blessing because the simplified aero reduces the risk of correlation issues, a problem Ferrari has battled for years between its wind tunnel, CFD, and track results. A curse because the team has not always adapted quickly to major aerodynamic resets. But there is hope. Ferrari's technical reorganization, headed by Frédéric Vasseur, includes new hires from rival teams, a restructured aero department, and improved development alignment. If Ferrari can enter 2026 with a stable conceptual direction, something they have lacked for over a decade, they could produce one of the most competitive chassis of the new era. Expect Ferrari to gain in high-speed balance, an area where the team showed flashes of excellence in recent seasons. But also, expect continued uncertainty in low-speed traction and tire management, where Ferrari has repeatedly struggled. However, the real future of Ferrari in 2026 depends not on the car, but on the people. Under Vasseur, Ferrari has begun shedding the bureaucratic paralysis that defined the team's worst years. Gone is the defensive posture. Gone is the obsession with avoiding blame rather than pursuing solutions. In its place, Vasseur has introduced a pragmatic leadership style reminiscent of the Todt era, not dictatorial, but structured, calm, and deeply analytical. Ferrari in 2026 will be the first true test of whether Vasseur's cultural shift has taken root. The team is more international, more methodical, and less emotionally reactive than before. A critical evolution in the hyper-rational world of modern Formula One. Still, Ferrari's greatest weakness remains unchanged: the weight of expectation. Every mistake is magnified. Every strategy error goes viral. Every pit stop miscue becomes a symbol of systemic failure. No other team must race not only their rivals, but also their history. Will this pressure continue to suffocate Ferrari in 2026, or will the reset liberate them? Now, let us consider the drivers. Charles Leclerc enters 2026 at the peak of his career, hungry, consistent, and emotionally bonded to the Ferrari project. He needs the championship he has been chasing since his debut. But Leclerc has also reached the point where his patience is finite. Ferrari must give him a championship-caliber car soon, or they risk losing a generational talent to a rival. On the other side of the garage, Ferrari's incoming young talent, whether Sainz remains or a new star emerges, will shape the team's future dynamics. If Ferrari finally produce a balanced, predictable car, the pairing could be one of the strongest on the grid. But if 2026 exposes more structural weaknesses, expect tension to rise quickly. Ferrari cannot afford another season defined by strategic confusion or operational inconsistency. Operationally, Ferrari has made progress. Pit stops are smoother, strategy calls more cohesive. But 2026 will expose the truth. Has Ferrari truly evolved, or have they simply put new paint on an old machine? Now, the broader context: Mercedes is rebuilding, McLaren is ascending, Audi is storming the gates with manufacturer firepower, Red Bull faces instability, the grid is compressing. Ferrari enters 2026 not as the favorite, not as the underdog, but as the great unknown, a team with enormous potential and equally enormous risk. So, what should we expect? Expect Ferrari to start the season stronger than in previous resets. Expect improved correlation, clearer technical direction, and a power unit that, while not the class of the field, is no longer a weakness. Expect Leclerc to extract performances that keep Ferrari in the fight for victories. Expect operational errors to decrease, but not disappear. Expect Ferrari to be competitive, but not dominant. Expect flashes of brilliance. Expect heartbreak. Expect the familiar emotional roller coaster that only Ferrari provides. And yet, for the first time in many years, expect genuine hope. Ferrari may not win the 2026 championship, but they will not collapse. The team is finally stabilizing, modernizing, and rediscovering its identity. And identity in Formula One is as valuable as horsepower. The new era offers Ferrari a rare gift: a clean slate, a level playing field, a chance to stop chasing their past and start building their future. If they seize it, the Scuderia could become a true championship contender again. If they fail, the 2026 season will simply become another entry in the long catalog of missed opportunities. But for now, one thing is certain. Ferrari enters 2026 with something it has not possessed in years: direction. And in Formula One, direction is the first step back to greatness.
There are few things in Formula One more tragic, more theatrical, and more infuriatingly predictable than a Ferrari season that begins with hope and ends with heartbreak. And 2025, for the Scuderia, became yet another chapter in a book that has grown far too thick over the past 2 decades. The book of almost, of not quite, of if only. What was missing for Ferrari in 2025? The better question might be, what hasn't been missing for Ferrari since the golden Schumacher years? For a team with the largest budget, the deepest heritage, and the loudest global fan base, 2025 should have been the year of redemption. Instead, it became another study in internal contradiction, technical stagnation, and the crushing weight of expectation. To understand Ferrari's latest failure, one must start with the car itself. The 2025 Ferrari chassis, on paper, was not a disaster. In fact, in early winter testing, it showed promise. Good top-speed numbers, more stability in fast corners, and a redesigned floor meant to extract cleaner airflow for more downforce. But once the season began, the illusion collapsed. Ferrari found itself trapped in the same cycle that has plagued it for years. A car that was strong in isolated conditions, but hopelessly inconsistent over different track profiles. One weekend, the SF25 looked like a podium threat. The next, it fell out of contention entirely. And in modern Formula One, where McLaren and Mercedes had engineered cars with far broader performance windows, inconsistency is fatal. The core problem was aerodynamic efficiency, or the lack of it. Ferrari once again produced a car that generated downforce, but at a high drag cost. On circuits requiring maximum straight-line speed, they were exposed. On circuits requiring high downforce, they were nearly competitive but never dominant. The car lived in the mid-zone of mediocrity, good enough to hint at success, never good enough to deliver it. Drivers can adapt to oversteer, understeer, balance issues, tire wear, but they cannot outperform drag. It is a mathematical wall. Ferrari hit it all season long. Then comes strategy, the eternal ghost that haunts Ferrari. Even after leadership changes and structural reforms, the Ferrari pit wall in 2025 still struggled with real-time decision-making. Too conservative in some races, bafflingly aggressive in others, and routinely 1 or 2 laps behind rival strategists. Tire windows were misjudged, pit stop calls were mistimed, and when the car is already fighting structural limitations, strategy becomes the difference between damage control and disaster. Ferrari repeatedly chose disaster, but the deeper issue, the one insiders whisper about and long-time reporters like myself recognize instantly, is Ferrari's internal culture. The pressure inside Maranello is unlike anything else in global sport. Every mechanic, every engineer, every strategist carries the burden of 70 years of expectation. Success is demanded, not requested. Failure is punished swiftly, often irrationally. And that environment, for all its passion, has produced technical turnover at a rate that kills continuity. No team can win championships when every year brings new hires, new leaders, new philosophies, and new attempts to reinvent the wheel. Stability is the backbone of victory. Mercedes had it, Red Bull had it, McLaren built it. Ferrari in 2025 once again failed to secure it. And then, of course, there is the driver pairing. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz are both tremendously talented, quick, precise, and capable of wins in the right machinery. But in 2025, Ferrari did not give them the tools to fight. Leclerc's qualifying brilliance kept Ferrari afloat, but he was constantly forced into defensive races on Sundays due to a car that overheated its tires and lacked race pace efficiency. Sainz, ever the methodical and cerebral driver, found himself unable to attack aggressively enough to compensate for the technical shortcomings. Together, they were strong, but never strong enough to overcome the inherent flaws of the package beneath them. Another critical point was development. Ferrari's in-season upgrades simply did not deliver enough performance. Wind tunnel correlation issues resurfaced, a quiet horror for any F1 team, and some aerodynamic updates produced gains in simulation that evaporated on track. Meanwhile, McLaren hit nearly every upgrade window with uncanny precision, and Mercedes finally escaped their zero-pod ghost with a fundamentally coherent philosophy. Ferrari, by contrast, spent 2025 slow dancing with theoretical gains that failed to materialize. Leadership, too, cannot escape criticism. While the public messaging remained optimistic, the internal decision-making lacked the cutting edge necessary to win championships. Red Bull has brutal clarity, Mercedes has cold efficiency, McLaren has momentum and unity, Ferrari has romance, emotion, nostalgia, and pressure. But titles are not won with poetry. They are won with coherence. Ferrari had passion in 2025, but they did not have coherence. And let us not ignore the political undercurrent, the invisible force that has shaped Ferrari for decades. Because Ferrari is not merely a racing team, it is an Italian national monument, a global brand, a political instrument, and a cultural icon. Decisions are never purely sporting. They are influenced by shareholders, corporate strategy, national pride, and historical legacy. Such institutions rarely make robotic, ruthlessly efficient choices. They make emotional ones. And emotional choices rarely win championships in the modern era. So what ultimately was missing for Ferrari in 2025? A better car, yes. A more unified team structure, certainly. A more aggressive and accurate strategic department, absolutely. But above all, what Ferrari lacked was identity. The team has spent years oscillating between philosophies: high downforce, low downforce, high rake, low rake, aggressive design, conservative design, never fully committing, never fully trusting themselves. Winning teams know exactly who they are. Ferrari in 2025 did not. They needed the aerodynamic brilliance of Red Bull, the operational discipline of Mercedes, the development momentum of McLaren, and the cultural calm of Aston Martin. Instead, they had echoes of all these things, but mastery of none. Ferrari once ruled Formula One with an iron fist, the Todt Braun Schumacher dynasty. Since then, they have been a team chasing ghosts, trying to resurrect an era rather than build a new one. Did Ferrari fail in 2025? Yes, but more painfully, they failed in the same ways they have failed for almost 20 years. Until Ferrari confronts the systemic disorder beneath the red paint, until it stops being a museum and starts being a machine. Another failure will continue to be an annual headline rather than an anomaly.